What's happened in our economy is that those who are doing better and better, more skilled, more educated, luckier, having greater advantages, are withdrawing from sort of the commons. Kids start going to private schools. Kids start working out at private clubs instead of the public parks. An anti-government ideology then disinvests from those common goods and those things that draw us together. And that, in part, contributes to the fact that there's less opportunity for our kids, all of our kids.
All right. I've been meaning to play that soundbite for quite some time. I think that was him at Georgetown. And I'm so glad Larry Elder is on the panel, radio host, of course, author of Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours. And I'm sure we'll get David Goodfriend, Democratic strategist, former Deputy Staff Secretary to President Clinton, who is back. Okay, good, David. I'm glad you're there. But Larry, let me start with you. I don't know if you heard the soundbite, David, but it was from Georgetown University, the president saying how, the way we have these economic problems is people start sending their kids to private school, and then they work out at private clubs instead of at the parks. And, meanwhile, Larry, my God, what a hypocrite.
Where do we start? Where do we start? I don't think Obama's ever set foot in a public school for himself. He got educated at Punahou, the finest school in the state of Ohio. Then he comes to a private school here in L.A. at Occidental. Then he goes to an Ivy League school, Columbia. Then he goes to Harvard, sends his daughters to Sidwell Friends. He's done exactly what he claims causes you not to care about the poor. So somehow, some way, he was able to have this elite life himself and send his kids to elite schools and still be empathetic. But I guess other people can't do that. It's incredibly hypocritical.
And David, I'm going to save you from having to defend the indefensible and take it to where Obama is today. Today he's in New Jersey, in Camden, New Jersey, which is maybe the most crime-ridden city in all of the United States of America. And he chooses to go there to tout how he's going to limit the equipment police could get from the Pentagon and the military-like equipment, and how, progress has been made in Camden. I would love to see him and his family walk down the streets of Camden alone, or anybody that he knows, have them walk down the streets of Camden alone. He would never let them do it. I mean, more hypocrisy and more insanity. As cops get killed and attacked in record numbers, he's cutting back on the options that police have.
Well, there's a lot there to work with. Let me start with this. I do think it's unfair for any of us, whether I'm talking about President George Bush or you're talking about President Obama, kind of unfair for us to say, well, he'd never walk down the street in Canada. Yes, the president leads life in a bubble, and a lot of presidents have, and a lot of presidents will. I think there's a more important point you're making here, though, and it's worth discussing, and that is whether or not it makes sense to change the degree to which police forces use military-grade equipment. And here we have an interesting meeting of the minds, I think, between the left and the right, because a lot of people on the right, people who support gun rights, for example, would say, I don't like a police force run by the government that's capable of rolling over me. I want to be able to defend myself. You look at the NRA, you look at what they've stood for, they will say right up front, we want citizens armed so that they can't get rolled by government power. Well, if you arm police to the extent that they look like a paramilitary unit, that's just rolling over citizens, perhaps too great a degree that we want in a democracy.
All right. Well, Larry, I think
danger in military.
Larry, you're going to have to wait until after the break to come back on that, and we will. We'll pick it up with that. We also have Stephanopoulos to talk about, and the Pope recognizing a Palestinian state and embracing to a great degree Mahmoud Abbas. It's coming back. Don't go away. All right, folks, we left you in suspended animation before the break. Welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show. Malzberg panel, Larry Elder, David Goodfriend, and it was Larry's turn to respond. I criticized Obama for going after and limiting the kind of military hardware the police forces around the country could have, and doing it in Camden, New Jersey. And Larry, David brought up that a lot of people on the right would like to see that as well, because they want to be able to, fight with their guns that they own if it ever came down to that. But
Right.
I just think, when you look at a place like Ferguson or Baltimore, in those kinds of situations, I don't think anybody would begrudge the police, any NRA member would begrudge the police having all the equipment they could have.
Well, it's a non-issue. First of all, have you seen anybody in the streets of Ferguson or Baltimore or Staten Island saying, hands up, get rid of military-style equipment? They're not. The question is whether or not the police are engaging in unlawful racial profiling. That's what people are concerned about. So rather than have a conversation about that and about black crime, let's talk about something that everybody can agree on and that nobody is terribly upset about. That's what Obama has done.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on because I want to get it in before we run out of time, and that is the Pope, David. Not only last week accepting or recognizing, if you will, a Palestinian state. We had Bill Donahue of the Catholic League on earlier, and he's not happy. And he said one of the things the Pope should have done was demand, as a prerequisite to that the Palestinians recognize Israel and their right to exist at the very least before recognizing any Palestinian state.
Well, this is a fraught issue, especially for somebody like me who feels very strongly about Israel's right to exist and prosper and live in peace. However, I do think that this has been a festering wound for so long that if we just try to turn our head the other way and hope that the problem goes away, it's never going to get resolved. And that is the need for a separate state for Palestine, because I think Israel is no longer going to be able to maintain itself as a majority Jewish state long term if there's a so-called one-state solution. Palestinians will start to outnumber Jews in Israel, and I think a second state recognized by Israel and by the rest of the world is really the only solution. Now, whether or not the Catholic Church helped or hindered in that effort by recognizing Palestine prematurely, that is before other countries in the Western world were able to say the same thing and do it through a UN process, that I think is fair and open for debate. But let's not lose sight of the fact that if we want Israel to survive long term, I think we have to have an independent.
David, I think Israel knows Israel knows what's best for its own survival long term, and having a state run by Hamas and a Yasser Arafat in a suit and tie named Mahmoud Abbas, who applauds martyrs, as he calls them, who kill innocent Jewish women and children, builds statues to them, and names streets after them, and teaches their kid to kill the Jew. I don't think that that's going to be good for Israel in the long term either, Larry.
Steve, this is just Middle East politics 101. If you want to have a two-state solution, you have to have two viable parties who want a two-state solution. The Charter of Hamas calls for the destruction of Israel, and Mahmoud Abbas, the moderate, still hasn't called for the recognition of Israel as a Jewish state. So I don't understand exactly why you're rewarding people that are espousing your destruction. It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
And David, it sounds like you're all on board with what Obama's probably going to do, and that's go to the UN to get a Palestinian state.
I don't think that's at all what Obama's going to do. I think Obama has said right up front that he does not support Palestine going to the international court, that he does not support Palestinian efforts to get recognition at that court prior to a negotiated agreement between both countries and the United States for a Palestinian state. I mean, we are talking about the difference between tactics and objectives. If we can agree that the objective of having a two-state solution is better for Israel, which I think the vast majority of Israelis and American Jews in poll after poll say, the next question is, what's the best tactic? I don't think the Catholic Church, in this case the pontiff, has exercised the best judgment using this
But
tactic.
David, even agreeing on a two-state solution, we only have a minute here, we can't do it justice. Palestinians want a two-state solution, but they want right of return. Right of return would render Israel into a Palestinian state, and the new state would be a Palestinian state. Besides the fact they don't recognize Israel's right to exist, besides the fact they support terror, besides the fact Hamas is part of that state, I mean, there is no possibility.
Daniel seemed to be very confident that Obama was not going to go to the United Nations. I am not. Remember, Obama said that in the waning days of Bibi Netanyahu's campaign, he drifted away from a two-state solution, and that caused Obama to reassess how he felt about Israel. Yep. So I have no idea whether or not Obama is going to go to the United Nations and try to impose a state on that area.
Guys, we're done. David Goodfriend, Larry Elder. We'll pick it up next time. Thank you both very, very much. Folks, we brought back our viewer call-in segment here on the Steve Malzberg Show. So if you like the show or don't like the show and you want to weigh in with me on the issues of the day or talk to me for whatever reason, here's your chance. You email us at call Steve at Newsmax.com. Again, that's call Steve at Newsmax.com because we want to hear from you, but you have to take the first step. Let us know how we can reach you during the course of the day. Jennifer Rubin is next. Don't go away.